The reason that I'm doing this podcast is I want people to understand the difference between wisdom and knowledge. They're two very different things. Knowledge can be gained through education, through learning. Wisdom tends to be gained through experience. And I'm super excited to introduce our guest today. Jeff Salzman has a long history of being a student of both Buddhism and also a student of Ken Wilber, who developed some time ago something called integral philosophy. The nice thing about integral philosophy is it has a very long shelf life. And that tends to be true of most forms of wisdom. They endure across generations and across cultures and across societies. So Jeff, excited to introduce you and would love for you to introduce yourself to our audience.
Oh, thanks, Bruce, and thanks for having me. Yeah, I am basically a self-educated scholar. I was a business guy and retired young and have been, a seeker my whole life.
Right.
And when I discovered integral philosophy, it was like, oh, that's I don't know if that's it, but that explains so much, because it literally seeks to include all of the wisdom from every tradition, from every era, from every culture into a larger pattern. And that pattern is powered by evolution, like kind of everything is. I always think of the wonderful line from Daniel Dennett, who said that evolution is the greatest idea that anyone has ever had. And so integral recognizes evolution, but not just in terms of the exteriors, not just in terms of cells and bodies and of course even atoms and molecules, but in terms of consciousness and culture. And so what integral postulates is that, and if we just look at humanity, we could look at the animal kingdom if we want to, but looking at humanity, we can see that human beings have evolved through various discernible stages and continue to evolve. And we have mapped out 6 stages that have already arisen. And you can see it if you have the map.
Can you show that? Bring that up.
But the first one is, and I'll go through the first few quickly, because there's 3 that are online today, and that mainly, and they all hate each other. Every stage kind of really deeply does not get each other. In fact, the earlier stages can't. It would be like asking a 3-year-old to understand a 15-year-old. You can't do it. So that first stage is what we would call the archaic stage. And this is the stage where you just, humanity looked in the pond and saw the reflection and said, I am, and just became self-conscious. And this was the birth of that. And when you move through tribal, which is where individuals are less differentiated and more just part of a tribal system. And then we move into what we would call the empire or warrior stage. And this is the early empires that we see in the Mayans and Egyptians, and we use colors, but the main label for that would be the warrior level. And we'll get back to that because that level is still very much online. The tribal and the archaic level are less, I mean, they're pretty much in the vanishing edge of human history. And so after the warrior stage comes traditionalism. And traditionalism is what's online today. Traditionalism is where there's an idea of one God, a transcendent God. There's a nationalism. And this is, in our current structure, the God and country people. These are the people who we would say are on the right, okay? And so and we're talking about consciousness and culture here. So this is how people think, how they see themselves. And one of the ways of looking at it is first, second, and third person. We're evolving in all 3 of those. So first person is how I, in my case, my Jeffness, my interiority, how I see the world. Second person would be how I relate to other people and how other people relate to other people and how larger groups and cultures relate to each other. And the rules of second person have evolved through these stages. And then third person is sort of the stuff. It's the technology. In the case of, where we are now, it's science. That's the next stage. So we move from the Red Warrior stage to the traditional stage, which is the God and country people. And then the next stage is secular, and that's the modern age. And this is where this scientific materialism basically takes over. And God is basically gone in 100 years, if in the sense of where it was when people were, traditional. So I'll just lay it out. So traditional, modern is secular, and then postmodern.
Sorry, let's show the slide again. There you go.
There we go.
Okay, so let's just go back and make sure that our listeners are following along here.
All right. So we have the first stage, which is basically the dawning of consciousness itself, or self-reflective consciousness, self-consciousness, what makes us different than animals,
right?
The reflective self-consciousness. And then all of the, relationships that we have at that stage, which are pretty much instinctive.
Okay.
And that's most of human history.
Is that shown here?
Yeah, that's the archaic stage.
That's infrared archaic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, the next stage is tribal, and the color we use is magenta. But tribal is, where we don't need to go any deeper than it's, where the individual is basically embedded in a magical world, in deep community. Mm-hmm. They move through various stages of life, through initiation, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And it generally has to be pretty small groups of people. Mm-hmm. And then as society, we can see this as evolution is. It's a complexification. Things get more complex. So after tribal, the next stage would be the warrior stage. And this is where you get the big empires of history, the Romans, the Mayans, that sort of thing. Still very aggressive, egocentric, exploitative, slavery, brutality.
Yeah.
And that stage is still online. Mm-hmm. The earlier stages have vanished into history for the most part. So we're dealing with this Red Warrior stage. And then the next stage is the stage of traditionalism. And that's a stage that there's lots of in this world. And in the United States, it would be the people on the right. So they believe in a transcendent God. They're very patriotic. They have a strong kind of morality, traditional morality, social conservatism, that mm-hmm. sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Okay. So then the next stage, and you can see that these stages emerged in history. Traditionalism used to be the cutting edge, back 300-400 years ago.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then there, Galileo, and all of a sudden the idea that the world is knowable. It's not about faith and obedience. My goal is not necessarily to get to heaven. My goal is to understand this world, and on its own terms. So modernity becomes secular, multinational in its later manifestations. And this is where a lot of people are. Most people have, you can look at it as a stack that people have. Most people have all of these really online. You can go right down to there's tribal vibes and currents in mm-hmm. all of us and in all cultures. It's still there. It's just not the leading edge anymore. So you move through traditionalism, then modernity, then postmodernity is that's the stage where it's pluralistic. It's the left. It's mm-hmm. Egalitarian, pluralistic, sensitive. It seeks to bring in the people who have been left out in the previous stages of history. So if we just look at the three big stages that are online in the US, we have traditionalism, and that they tend to divide the world between good and bad, saints and sinners.
Right.
Modern divide the world between smart people and dumb people, or winners and losers. And when you get to postmodern, you divide the world between people who have a sensitivity and people who, from their perspective, don't. And it's basically the sensitivity to the people who have been the victims of the earlier stages, so the sinners. Postmodernity wants to bring the sinners back online. They want to bring the losers.
So let me interrupt here and ask you a question. Because I'm thinking about this in terms of my own evolution. And I feel as though, particularly in the last, say, 10 years or so, I have been moving more towards a non-judgmental level of awareness. And what I'm hearing you say is in the traditional, the modern, and the postmodern, there's still this level of segmentation and judgment.
Yep. Who's in and who's out.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Am I right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then what I'm interested in exploring with you is how do we individually and how do we as a society move beyond that?
Yeah. Where
we're no longer judging other groups because they may be different than us.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's moving into the next stage of development, which is, postmodern, or what we would call integral. And at integral consciousness, you know, every stage moves because it just gets bored. Once you get traditionalism under your belt and you become obedient and civilized and, open to, the forces of the world and so forth, then you want to sort of move to the next stage. Yeah. And the next stage. And so when people get tired of the postmodern progressive, or at least they have it adequately online, basically, then there's the next stage, the integral stage, basically seeks to include the best of the previous stages, of all of the previous stages. And that's, in a way, what you're talking about. You become deeply friendly to people who are operating at these earlier stages. So you seek to understand them on their terms, see the world as best you can. It's a practice. You don't necessarily ever get it right, but you try to see the world the way they do. And until, everybody gets to be who they are. We're not trying to grow anybody. We're not trying to fix anybody. We're trying to appreciate everybody at the stage of development they're at. It's like a child. You don't, a 12-year-old is not a defective 15-year-old.
So, the prior podcast I did was focused on the complexity of the father-son relationship. And my guest kind of walked through 4 phases of male development. I think at some level it applies to females too, but it's a male-centered sort of wording. He talked about the squire, the knight, the prince, and the king as stages of evolution. And how does a squire move, into what I would consider to be the warrior phase, the knight phase. It's all about strength, aggression, defining your territory, defining your individuality, and then moving into the prince phase where there's a sort of a settling down period. And you begin to think about broader issues. How am I going to build a family? How am I going to build a community? And we talked about the fact that so many individuals get stuck at one phase, even late into their life. They may still think of themselves as the knight until their body starts to really fail. And then all of a sudden they go, now what am I going to do? Right?
Yeah.
And but others, move into the prince phase and ultimately getting to that king phase, which is the leadership role, and not just dictatorial leadership, but compassionate leadership, service-based leadership. And how do I become the most effective ruler of my kingdom? And how do I express the values that mean a lot to me within my kingdom? And it seems like there's some analogies here between, this sort of evolutionary process and what he was speaking to.
Well, yeah, I mean, the warrior would be the analogous to the
king, or the knight. Sorry.
The knight,
yeah,
exactly. And in the case of Integral, we're talking about, what's actually happening is we have more and more that we are able to become aware of. And so at the integral stage, we could absolutely see it as kingly, in the sense that you love the whole kingdom at this point. You feel responsible for it. And you're not blaming anybody or demonizing anybody. Everybody's a good guy. Everybody's doing, in a way, the best they can at the stage of development that they're at. It's like, again, looking at children. That's, it's not the same, but it's analogous. You can see that you wouldn't expect people who are at a warrior stage. It's like what we're talking about with Iran and the Middle East and so forth. I mean, at the stage, particularly of the mullahs, it's a holy warrior. It's traditional, so it has God is very much alive. The goal of life is not to live a long life necessarily. It's to be obedient and go to heaven. That's where life really is.
Right.
So that's the traditional stage. And, people feel that more or less strongly, but it's basically a way of seeing the world and sort of feeling the world. And then that warrior is, you just wake up in the morning and who am I going to fight?
Yeah.
And that was a lot of human history. That was as good as it got, in these empires. And even I'm reading the history of the West and the Comanches particularly. Yeah. And, they woke up in the morning and thought about who they were going to fight.
Right.
That was just their life, and hunt and so forth, and support that mission. So we have people who have, at the stage of development they're at, we would call them holy warriors.
Right.
And so, and there are people in America who are also at that stage. They're a much smaller percent than they would be in a place like Afghanistan. Iran's kind of a bit of a question, because there are a lot of Iranians who are modern, scientific, even postmodern. They're hip, and cool. That is, so, every stage every country has their particular mix of people at these various stages, all struggling. Evolution loves us fighting. Evolution loves us being on edge. Evolution loves, confusion and chaos in a certain way. And that's one of the things that I love about Integral, is that we often refer to it as a post-tragic view of the world.
So maybe we could explore that a little bit more, because when I first learned of Integral, which was through you speaking about this and looking at the chart that we showed, I thought to myself, my really initial thought was, this is a framework that is helping me make sense of the chaos in the world. And, all of humanity right now, because of social media and 24/7 news, is feeling that chaos. And so we've got three global leaders, all of which fit into this chart somewhere. I suspect they all, fit into the traditional or the warrior phase. So I'd just be interested, you've obviously considered this and thought through it. You've got experience with this process. How are you thinking about that relative to the current chaos that we live in?
Yeah. Well, just to start somewhere, we would look at something like Russia and Ukraine.
Yeah.
So Russia is a center of gravity traditional country, religious, nationalistic, and because of its autocratic sort of, there's been a lid on it in a way in terms of acculturating with the rest of the world. And so, they're basically at a traditional level, center of gravity. There's modern and postmodern Russians. There's earlier than that. Ukraine was more European. European is another stage advanced. So center of gravity of like Northern Europe is postmodern.
Yeah.
But the center of gravity of Ukraine wanted to be modern. And so this is human history, man. This is like every stage is at war with the previous one. And at every stage, this, like traditionalists see modernity as a, certainly not a step up. I mean, you're
threat.
Losing your religion, you're losing your heart, you're losing your soul to the soulless technocracy of modernity and globalism and that sort of thing. That's one of the things that's happening as the world becomes, in my opinion, more integral, or at least there's an integral sort of vibe that's arising, is it's in reaction to a lot of globalization, multiculturalism, and not that globalism and multiculturalism are bad. They're essential stages of development, and the best of them will continue. But there was something that they wanted to leave behind, which is the soul of a country, the identity of a country, the traditional, even the religion, the part that's, you talked about knowledge and wisdom. Wisdom has a certain neck down quality to it. Knowledge is all neck up.
Right.
So in Integral, we want to be integrating this neck down stuff. And so all three of these leaders are actually doing that. Putin, it's as we say, it's evolution is beautiful, but not pretty. So, it's not pretty what's going on. Conflict or contest is this traditionalism, modernity, and postmodernity, and they're duking it out. And, these leaders are, they're like most people, able to function in the modern world. They could look at data and all that good stuff, but they're also willing to use they carry the soul of their country, and unabashedly, and modern and postmodern don't like that. And they also are willing to use red, which means force, basically.
Yeah.
And welcome to the modern world, or the contemporary world, where all of this is happening. And I would say, too, that the U.S. is developmentally center of gravity ahead of both Russia and China.
Yeah.
And it's like when you talk about these stages of development, it's like a 6-year-old kid. Every kid's different. Every culture's different. Some kids, 6-year-olds could be, operating at a little higher here, but there's still very much things you can say about 6-year-olds that are true for all 6-year-olds. So, right now the U.S. has to navigate these two other great powers that are operating at earlier stages of development. And they have nuclear weapons, which are, modern. That's one of the great sort of dangers of our world, is that we have modern technology in the hands of pre-modern consciousness and culture. Mm-hmm. And, they could never have developed it themselves. Traditional people could never do the science that's required to do thing much. We were agrarian for 5,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway.
Well, yeah, let me switch subjects right now and take it into the more personal realm.
Yeah.
So this is a framework. Societies move through a certain stages. Those stages coexist. The stages don't like each other. What about individually? And I'm going to ask you a personal question, even though I don't know you well. How has this helped you in terms of in times of crisis in your own life? Or has it? What has it meant to you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, there's a certain spiritual quality to it, actually. Why is this even happening? Why did atoms want to become molecules? Why do molecules want to become cells? Why do cells want to become organisms? Why did consciousness develop where it wanted to at some point become self-conscious and reflective and able to see itself? It's crazy.
Yeah, it is.
So there's something going on here.
Right.
And so evolution, there's a certain, there's a religion in there somewhere.
There's a beauty to it.
Yes. And again, beautiful, but not pretty in terms of all of the struggle and, blood and guts. That's the post-tragic world. You have to accept that this is the Christians would call it a fallen world. Buddhists call it samsara. It's just the nature of things. I didn't make the rules. These are the rules.
Right.
We suffer and fight our way forward. Right. I wish we didn't.
Yeah.
But we do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know where we were, but
yeah.
You're talking about personally.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
That's always, in my view. And then also, I recognize my own sort of red, selfish, egocentric, fuck everybody kind of stage.
Mm-hmm.
That's there. And then when I see it, it's like seeing red in the culture, or this warrior stage. You want to be friendly to it, not in a stupid way, but you want to not say you shouldn't be that way or you shouldn't be here.
Right.
That's one of the great things about Integral is everybody gets to be here.
Right.
And so you're not really, I react to people, please, and I have my political whatevers, but I don't hold them. I certainly don't try to reify them. I try to, and do actually, look at people and do you appreciate where they're coming from? So, I talk to conservatives, like liberal friends, progressive. What I find is that it's very difficult to talk to regular people and have more than one worldview online, to be able to see the left and the right.
Right.
And to be friends with both of them. That people don't like that.
Yeah, which is, you touch on another interesting subject. I read a story a few weeks ago about a father who had a child and he had refused to allow his own father to have anything to do with him or his child because his own father was a supporter of Trump. And I talked about this a little bit in my past podcast with my other guest, and he made the comment, unfortunately, we live in a cancel culture. And but it's unfathomable to me the level of polarization that has occurred in our society. Like that's foreign to me. When I was in college, I could have cared less if somebody had declared themselves as a Republican or a Democrat. And now it's a fervor. It's like a priority for people. And it gets back to this concept of judgment. And you're wrong, I'm right, and I can't have anything to do with you. So, for the benefit of our listeners, how do we advance through that? because it's not healthy for our world. It's not healthy for each other. It doesn't further this concept of love being the organizing principle of everything, evolution included.
Yes.
So, those are the questions that I wrestle with, and I'm interested in your perspective.
Well, to get real granular, so you're having a dinner party or you're having friends over and, some of this stuff comes up. So there's a wonderful principle that I stuck with me from, I got it from Quaker. I'm not a Quaker, but it's part of the Quaker meeting kind of. It's the two great rules of the Quaker meeting. And they as you might expect with Christians, they articulate it as the two sins, two things to avoid doing when you're in a second person relationship with other people. One is to speak when not moved. So what's that even mean? So speak when moved means you have to be moved not to hear yourself speak, not to get the edge on the argument, but to bring a love, a sort of a liquid love to the thing. And that's, who knows what that is, but that's your orientation. So speak when moved. And then the other sin, which I love, it's a little more counterintuitive, and that is to not speak when moved. So you not only can, you have to not speak when you're not moved, but if you are moved, you have to speak.
You better speak up.
Yeah. And that's a nice, and it's nice and easy. And so, when you're with a group of people, politics can be very poisonous, particularly now, because I don't think we're actually any more contentious than we ever were, probably less, actually, in terms of human history. We used to, beat each other up with clubs. And, the amount of violence per capita has steadily decreased through human history. But now we do it through, character assassination instead of real assassination. Or, we do it with, I consider the age we're in, I think our grandchildren will look back at this age and look at it as the age of ideology. This was the age when everybody was like crazy about their ideas and their worldviews, and everybody was in the arena fighting it out. Now, it used to be, we had the age of empires, we had the age of great religious wars. There's still some of that going on. But in the more developed world, we're fighting with ideas. But it's real war, actually, like it always has been. What's great about today is that you could actually opt out if you don't want to. I mean, in the old days, when the Cherokees were camped on the other side of the Flatirons, you didn't have much of a choice. You had to be in politics.
Right.
And now we can opt out. We can read a novel, do our garden, raise our kids, and not pay much attention. I know friends who are actually doing that pretty successfully, just not plugging into it.
Yeah.
That's an option now. That itself is a marker of a high level of development, that you can actually have that as an option.
Right.
So, with those kinds of, with thinking about it in those terms, like bringing love, what moves me to bring this situation more towards love, and just understanding that we're supposed to be doing, there's nothing, it's not like we're doing anything wrong. We're here to get to be in the arena, and for the first time in history, we have an option not to get in the arena. Pretty good. I'll take that deal. Mm-hmm. But it's crazy, and it's crazy making, and evolution always wants humanity on the edge of crazy. I mean, I'm sorry, that's maybe a bad way of putting it, but it's one of the things that gets people up and in the game is, conflict with other people. Love too, and love's bigger than conflict. But conflict doesn't, at this stage of development, and at least we're now fighting with ideas and ideologies for the most part. I do think that the next stage of evolution, we won't fight as much. I do think that there's a radical change that will happen, because at some point when you become friendly to everybody, you're just not as motivated to fight. Just, you can't find an enemy. Everybody's got a piece of the truth. And it turns out that they have a piece of the truth that my guys don't.
Yeah. So let's talk about the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And, this is another area of concern of mine, and doing what I can to help influence it. But putting climate change aside, one of the big issues that I've become increasingly aware of and I'm learning more about is plastics, particularly single-use plastics, and the amount of it that's being dumped into the planet, not only in landfills, because much of it does not get recycled, but also the amount that is going into stormwater systems and ultimately ends up in the ocean. We are choking in this stuff. And there's a day of reckoning that is coming. My own personal belief, and this gets back to this concept of always on the edge with the integral philosophy, but we as a society tend to lurch from crisis to crisis. And it's the crisis that scares us enough that we actually begin to make a change. And, my concern here, I think there's a looming public health problem as we ingest more and more microplastics. And there's a looming planetary problem, with the fact that so much of this non-compostable 500-year-long water bottle or coffee container stays around. And, we can't continue to behave the way we do without there being meaningful consequences.
Yeah.
So where does that fit in here?
Well, you just articulated very well a postmodern view. Okay, so every stage of development has some disaster to it. If we think of the God and Country people, it's conformity and burning witches in the earlier stages.
Yeah,
modernity. When we became modern and we learned science and technology and embraced it and tripled our lifespans and quintupled our incomes, and we live the concept, the indoors. I mean, what a concept, right? So great benefits of modernity. But we poisoned about or exploited about half of the biosphere,
right,
in order to do that.
Mm-hmm.
That's a wild ass guess, but it's something like that.
It's a lot.
It's a lot, yeah. And so at some point, the limits of that just become obvious because we have figured it out. We can see it. We become world-centric. We can see not only, what I've got in front of me for dinner, but, the whole supply line. And we could see all of and so we begin to see what you're talking about, is that these wonderful, great things called plastics, which, I mean, how can you overstate the benefit of plastics? But there's the downside to it, and that becomes very obvious. And so there's what arises in the postmodern, and one of the ways that the new stage of postmodernity pushes off of modernity is it says, enough with the exploitation. Enough with, just not understanding the effects of the mining, and you put it in other countries and you try to not look at it. And so this postmodern, or what we would call the green stage of development, develops a deep sensitivity and a new outrage.
Right.
Because they can see, they can see the, and modern too, nobody wants to foul their nest, even tribal and indigenous people.
Sure.
So now all of a sudden our nest is the whole globe.
Yep.
because we have become aware of it. And, if you think of, I grew up, between Pittsburgh and Youngstown in the 70s.
Wow.
So, the big thing was don't go near the river.
Yeah.
Because I always had this idea if I put my hand in the river, it'd like come out with bones. I mean, I don't think it was quite true, but, now the Mahoning River, which is I grew up with, is clean.
Yeah.
People fish in it, boat in it.
Right.
So there was think of the litter. I don't know if you're old enough to remember when people would just throw their shit out the window. Everybody did. Nobody thought about it.
Right.
Then all of a sudden, don't be a litter bug. I don't know if you knew the jingle, but it was, and it consciousness grew. And so there's a consciousness that's continuing to grow. It's supposed to, it should. Always because of some crisis, always because of fear is a great engine of evolution. I hate to tell you.
Yeah, it is.
It is. But and I wish the rules were different. I think there's a move with evolution that we become more love-oriented than fear-oriented. And I think that our grandchildren will be that way more.
And if you go back and read even the most ancient wisdom, tribal wisdom, going all the way back, the very beginning, that is always reinforced again and again and again. People have known this since they became self-reflective and conscious. They've known, I feel I have this sentiment of love. I have this sentiment of oneness, but a lot of times these other evolutionary processes cause us to suppress that, as children.
Yes.
And so, obviously the path here is to move from that fear state and into a love state where we're taking care of each other. We're taking care of ourselves. We're taking care of each other. We're taking care of the planet, not based on some crisis that's happened. We found out that our loved one's getting ready to leave us. We better change our behavior and do something different. We find out that our child, has some disease that we didn't understand. And all of a sudden we're paying an appropriate level of attention to his or her needs. And we find out that, the planet is in some level of crisis. There's obviously a fire going on right now in the Front Range of Colorado, and it's March.
I know.
And we've had a historically low snowpack. And now we're going to move into this from snowpack crisis to water crisis to fire crisis. And there will be action. What I'm interested in, and what I hope our listeners are interested in, is moving into a state of taking care of ourselves, each other, and the planet out of love.
Yes.
And not having to do it because we're forced into it.
Hallelujah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the spiritual dimension of all of this.
Right.
Is that, one of the things that we talk about moving to integral is that we're integrating the earlier stages, the best of the earlier stages. That goes right down to that sort of, what's the individual stage that we would see that would be tribal? It'd be a family with kids. So how a 3 or 4 year old, the sort of liquid love they have for their family, and that sense of belonging and warmth and security, and that's the best of tribal, Right. And so we want that back, but humanity had to grow through these other stages, and so is a 13-year-old happier than a 3-year-old? Generally not.
Right.
And welcome to the evolution of culture as well. These stages bring on new understandings that fracture us, it showed the sort of disasters that we've been creating with science, with even there's disasters in post-modernity too.
Yeah.
And there's certainly disasters all the way up. Disaster, what do they say? Turtles all the way down. It's disasters, all the way down.
Right.
But also love. See, that's, you can't talk about the disasters and the downsides without talking about love being the sort of the whole thing.
Yeah.
The whole thing is it's seeking that connection, that oneness again. But this time, it's oneness post-knowledge.
Yes.
Not oneness pre-knowledge,
Right.
Which is great, but, evolution wasn't going to be satisfied with that.
Yeah. Well, listen, I always like to close these podcasts by asking a simple question, which is, if you knew that you only had till tomorrow, for whatever reason, what is it that you would like to share?
Well, what comes to mind is one of the sort of spiritual back pocket exercises that I've always loved. And it's from a line from a book that I don't know if you'll remember, but it's a novel from my childhood called A Tree Grows in Brooklyn.
Okay.
And the idea is that as a practice, if you practice seeing everything, so I got 24 hours, right? Or I got till tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
That's easy, because one of the practices is to see everything as if you were going to see it for the very last time.
Yeah.
Or that it's something where you're seeing it for the very first time.
Exactly.
Yeah. So either one of those is going to clear the decks, and you're going to penetrate. And it's like, oh my God, Bruce, I don't know you, but I'm never going to see you again. And furthermore, you're one of the last few men I'm ever going to see in my life.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. That's really powerful.
Yeah.
Or that plant. I'm looking at that plant behind you.
Oh,
and going,
plant.
oh my, that is the most beautiful.
I know. And it's not
plant.
even real. And it's beautiful. I mean, how many more beautiful artificial plants am I ever going to see?
Yeah.
So you can bring, and that's, again, I said back pocket, that's like walking through downtown.
Yeah.
It's like for the last time.
Right.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank
It's
you,
a great
Jeff.
question.
Yeah. Thank you.
The question sort of begs the answer.
Yeah. Well, and thank you for joining today.
All right. My
Really
great
enjoyed
pleasure.
it.
Thank you,
Okay.
Bruce.
Right. Thanks.